Today we're going to try and fix this Bear & Son Barlow. If you look at the centering, it's way off. It's very loose. When you open it up though, the blade is tight. So it's only loose when it's closed. So I'm going to set it on the anvil and I'm going to tap a little bit. And we're going to see what happens. Okay, that's tightened it up quite a bit here. Let me open it. It's not too bad open. And when I closed it, it did come to center. And when I push it, let me see if it comes back. It almost comes back. It needs just a little bit more. Now, one thing I'm doing when I'm tapping on this pin here, right where the pin is, I'm tapping a little bit on the back of it to close it up in back of the pin because it's loose when it's closed, but I don't want to increase the tension out here where it's open. So I'm going to go a little bit more, a few more taps over here. I'm just going to angle the hammer slightly, kind of favor the back just a hair. Just a few light taps at a time. Okay, can you see that centering in there? That looks pretty good right there. I'm going to open the blade and then close it and show you the centering. This thing would focus. Okay, right there you can see it. So that's not bad. The action on it, there's a half stop, nice snap on the close, and it no longer wiggles from side to side. I mean, you can force it from side to side, but it springs right back to being centered. So I'm going to call this knife fixed. The next thing I'll do is I'll have to sand the bolster here where I put a few scratches on it. Okay, I've got a few scratches on the bolster there that you can see. And on this side, the pin is just ever so slightly proud. So I'm going to sand those down. Now I'm going to start with, let me see. I'm going to start with 240 grit. So I'm just going to start here and sand in the area where the pin is. And there with that scratch pattern, you can see that the pin is a little proud and it's holding the area immediately surrounding the pin from taking on a scratch pattern. So we're just going to have to sand until that problem goes away and it feels smooth. It's going to take a little bit to sand that pin down. You see we've already made some progress. And it's best if you have fresh sandpaper. What I have here in my office at work has been used a couple times already. I'm going to keep going like this with the 240 until my work with it is done, and I'll come back before moving to the next grit. Okay, I'm done with the 240 grit. You can see it looks really dull. I don't have a proper progression of sandpaper, so I'm going to take a worn area of this and I'm going to sand lightly just to try and make a little bit smaller scratch pattern. And I'm only sanding in one way. I'm not sanding in multiple different directions. That'll help me with a consistent scratch pattern, and it'll make it easier to get it out on the higher grits. So even if you don't have all the proper stuff, you can fake it. You can tell that looks a little bit better. Now I'll do this side. So, like I said, using that same worn area of the paper and sanding lightly just to get a scratch pattern in here that's not quite as deep. Okay. Ideally, you'll have something like the 240, 320, 600, then something like 1200 or 1500, and 2000 or 2500, something like that. You want a good progression of papers, which unfortunately I don't have on me, like I said, right now. So you just fake it and do the best you can with what you have. You can see that is a much finer scratch pattern than what I've had before. Let me do the other side. Then after this, I'm going to go to 1500. This is worn 600 grit. Almost feels like 1500 grit. I don't know how much I'm actually benefiting by using it. Here's 1500 grit, and this is a good piece. So let's see where we can get with this. Should have higher, like I said, but I don't think I have anything higher than 1500 here. Let me take a quick peek. Nope, 1500's it. So we're going to have to sand heavy with the 1500 on both sides. Maybe get a slightly worn spot. I'll use the same part of the sandpaper on this side. Because as it wears, it gets finer. Also doesn't cut much, makes it harder to work with. But it should make a shallower scratch pattern. You can see a little bit of reflectivity coming back, and it's cloudy, but you can see a little bit. So let me go on this side some more with the worn spot and see if we can get this side to be a little bit reflective. You can see that's a little bit reflective. Next, we're going to do case paste. I'm going to put a little bit of case paste on the rag. Not too much. And then we're just going to start rubbing. You can see the black, so you can tell it's working. This case paste is really good stuff. If you've never used it, you have to pick some up. It's a great metal polish. It even works good on bone. Now let's buff it off. I'm going to do that one more time, but you can see that's looking pretty good again. So we'll put just a little bit of case paste on the rag. Don't need a lot of this stuff. Don't overuse it. And I'm applying a bit of pressure as I rub. Take a clean part of the rag, buff it off. And we're back to a nice mirror polish. Okay, let's do the other side. So as you can see, it's not that big a deal if you have to tighten up a pivot in one of these knives and you peen the pin over just a little bit, because when I was tapping on the anvil, I was tapping on the pin so that as it squeezed together, it also peened the pin over just a little bit so it'll stay together. You can just put these things in a vise and squeeze them to tighten up the pivots, but they usually end up working back loose on you. The permanent way to do it is to mushroom that end of the pivot and tighten that back up properly. Do it one more time. Again, just a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. And the other part, like I said, since it was loose when it was closed, I'm hitting on the pivot and behind the pivot. The idea is to bend the bolster in a little bit in back of the pivot and not in front of the pivot, because I don't want to tighten it up when the knife is open because it's nice and tight there already. It's like the bolsters are out of parallel. How it has the washer just in the one side. The bolsters aren't being held by the sides of the blade. So there's room for them to give. Okay, it needs a little bit more. I don't know if you can see this in the camera, but right in this area in here, it needs a little more. So we'll do this a third time there. I haven't tried it, but you could probably use this stuff with on a Dremel tool with a polishing wheel. Okay, and that's good enough. You can see the mirror finish. It looks pretty good. The knife is still pretty well centered. We'll open it. There's no blade play open. Half stop. Closed. Back to center. And the blade play is gone. Yes, like I said, I can force it to wiggle, but when I let go, it springs right back to center. So that's how you fix one of these Baron Son Barlows if you have the same problem that I had. That it's loose when it's closed and tight when it's open. Mine here has a washer only on one side. Now, Big J had reported in the comments that he has a thick washer on one side and a very thin washer on the other side. I can't see a washer on the second side. It's possible that there's a thin one down in there, but I can't see it. And whether it is there or not, it doesn't change the fact that these washers are a very small bearing surface. Those bolsters are not up against the sides of the blade, and the spring material that's used on the knife is thicker than the blade stock, so it does need some kind of a spacer in there to pad out the difference. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you found this useful, and you can fix your Barlow if you have the same problem as me. This is second one now that I've fixed, and I was 3 for 3. Okay, I have 3 different ones of these Barlows, and all 3 of them are loose when they're closed and tight when they're open. The only one that's perfect is the modern version. Here's the modern version of the Barlow. It does have washers on both sides. You probably won't be able to see them in the camera, but I can clearly see the gold color on each side of the blade. You have a regular screw together pivot. You have screw together construction. This one is perfect. See, that knife is perfectly centered. No blade play open. No blade play closed. So if you go with one of these modern ones, still Berenson Barlow, you should end up with a knife that runs perfectly. Your traditional style all seem to have problems, at least in the 3 samples that I've had a look at. All 3 were exactly the same. Still good functional knives. When the blades open, they're tight. Safe to use. They have good enough snap. There's enough spring tension there. But it just annoys me to no end when you close it and the blade doesn't center up, when everything else about the knife is really nice. This is also in carbon steel. These are Berenson uses 1095, and you can see right on there on the shield where it says Carbon 4th Collection, or 4th Carbon Collection, however you want to read it. See, these are still great knives for the price. You can find them in the upper $30 or lower $40 price range. And these moderns are a little bit more. These are approaching $60. This one is from Smoky Mountain Knife Works. All right, we'll see you on the next one.